The battlefield of Kronos VII was a graveyard of broken ships and shattered dreams. Smoke rose from the crimson soil like the final breaths of the fallen, and the air tasted of metal and regret. Alax moved through the debris with the practiced caution of a human soldier who had seen too many wars, his tactical visor scanning for survivors among the wreckage. The Galactic Coalition had deemed this skirmish a minor territorial dispute, but the bodies scattered across the landscape told a different story. The Valorian Empire had pushed hard, and humanity's mercenary forces had pushed back harder. Now, in the aftermath, Alax found himself on cleanup duty, a task he never enjoyed but always completed with grim efficiency. His boots crunched on broken glass as he rounded the collapsed hull of a Valorian transport. That's when he heard it, a soft whimper, barely audible above the settling debris. His hand moved instinctively to his sidearm, but he held fire. The sound was wrong for a threat. It was the sound of fear, pure and unfiltered. Alax approached slowly, his weapon lowered but ready. Behind a twisted sheet of hull plating he found her, a small Valorian child, no more than 5 cycles old by his estimation. Her violet skin was covered in dust and minor cuts, and her large, golden eyes were wide with terror. She clutched a damaged communication device to her chest like a lifeline. "Easy, little one," Alax said softly, though he knew she likely didn't understand human standard. He holstered his weapon and raised his empty hands. "I'm not going to hurt you." The child, he would later learn her name was Anya, pressed herself harder against the debris. Her small form trembled, and Alax's chest tightened at the sight. He had seen countless Valorians die in combat, had even killed his share, but this was different. This was innocence caught in the machinery of war. He activated his translator unit, the device chirping as it cycled through Valorian dialects. "Where is your family?" he asked, his voice emerging in her language as a series of melodic tones. Anya's eyes filled with tears that shimmered like liquid gold. She pointed toward the smoking ruins of what had been a civilian transport, a vessel that shouldn't have been anywhere near a combat zone. Alax's jaw tightened. Someone had made a catastrophic error in evacuation protocols, and this child had paid the price. "Come here," he said gently, extending his hand. "I'll get you somewhere safe." But Anya shook her head violently, her small fingers pointing past him. Alax turned, his combat instincts screaming a warning half a second too late. A damaged Valorian war drone, its circuits sparking and AI clearly corrupted, had locked onto their position. The telltale whine of charging plasma weapons filled the air. Time seemed to slow. Alax could see the drone's weapons array glowing with lethal energy. He could see the trajectory calculations in his visor, the red lines that showed exactly where the blast would land. And he could see Anya, frozen in terror, directly in the firing line. He didn't think. There was no time for thought, no room for calculation or strategy. There was only instinct, the deep primal human instinct that said, "Protect the child." Alax lunged forward, his body moving before his mind could object. He wrapped himself around Anya's small form, his armored back facing the drone as he curled over her like a shield. The world exploded in white-hot agony. The blast tore through his armor like paper, searing through flesh and bone. He felt his body failing, systems shutting down one by one. But he held on, kept his arms locked around the trembling child beneath him. He could hear her screaming, could feel her small hands clutching at his armor. "Stay down," he managed to gasp, tasting blood. "Don't move." The second blast never came. Through fading vision, he saw Valorian soldiers emerging from the smoke, their weapons trained on the malfunctioning drone. One fired, and the machine exploded in a shower of sparks. Then darkness claimed him. Alax woke to brightness, the sterile, clinical brightness of a medical facility. His body felt wrong, distant, like it belonged to someone else. Confused, he tried to sit up and found himself restrained by gentle but firm hands. "Easy, human," The voice spoke in perfect standard, though the accent was distinctly Valorian. "You have been heavily reconstructed. Movement must be gradual." His vision swam into focus. A Valorian medic stood over him, her expression unreadable by human standards but her posture suggesting respect. That couldn't be right. Valorians had been enemies for 3 years. Respect was the last thing he expected. "The child," Alax croaked, his throat raw. "Anya, is she?" "She lives," the medic said, and her voice carried something that might have been awe. "Because of you. Because you threw yourself upon a weapon of war to shield one of our young." Memory flooded back, the drone, the explosion, the desperate need to protect. "How long have I been out?" 17 days. Your injuries were catastrophic. We had to use advanced regeneration techniques typically reserved for our own commanders." The medic stepped back, and Alax noticed her uniform bore the insignia of a high-ranking medical officer. "The Empress herself authorized your treatment." Before Alax could process that information, the medical bay doors opened. He expected doctors, perhaps a human liaison, come to debrief him. What he got instead made his breath catch in his throat. Valorian soldiers filed in, dozens of them, their armor polished to a mirror shine. Officers he recognized from intelligence briefings, warriors whose names were spoken with fear in human camps. They moved with precision and purpose, forming 2 neat lines along either side of the medical bay. And then they knelt. Every single one of them went down on one knee, their heads bowed in a gesture Alax recognized from his cultural training. The Valorian Saltarak, the warrior's acknowledgement. It was a sign of profound respect, given only to those who had demonstrated extraordinary honor in battle. "What?" Alax tried to sit up again, and this time the medic helped him. "What is this?" A figure emerged from the crowd, an older Valorian, his armor marked with the symbols of a general. He approached Alax's bed and knelt as well, pressing his fist to his chest in salute. "You saved Anya," the general said, his voice heavy with emotion. "The Emperor's granddaughter, when the evacuation went wrong, when we thought her lost. You protected her, a human, our enemy." Alax's mind reeled. The Emperor's granddaughter. He'd had no idea, wouldn't have cared if he had. She'd been a child in danger. Nothing else mattered. "Where I come from," Alax said slowly, "you don't leave kids to die, enemy or not. That's not what we do." The general's expression shifted, and Alax realized with a start that the Valorian was smiling, a complex expression involving the subtle movement of facial plates. "We have studied humanity for years, tried to understand what makes you such formidable opponents. We cataloged your weapons, your tactics, your technological adaptations, but we missed the most important thing." He stood, and the assembled soldiers rose with him as one. "We missed your humanity, the thing that drives a soldier to throw himself on a weapon to save an enemy child, the instinct that says some things are more important than war." The doors opened again, and a small figure ran through the crowd of soldiers. Anya, her injuries healed, her golden eyes bright with life. She clutched a small stuffed creature to her chest and moved straight to Alax's bedside, her small hand reaching for his. "You saved me," she said in careful, practiced standard. "Thank you, Alax." The general stepped forward again, and his voice carried the weight of authority. "The Empress has declared a unilateral ceasefire. She wishes to negotiate peace terms with humanity, with you as our primary liaison if you will accept." Alax looked at Anya's small hand in his, at the kneeling soldiers, at the impossible situation he'd woken up to. He thought about all the battles he'd fought, all the enemies he'd killed, all the years of war that had seemed endless. "I'm just a soldier," he said quietly. "I'm not a diplomat." "Perhaps," the general replied. "That is exactly why you are the right choice. Diplomats speak of treaties and territories. But you, human, you spoke in a language we all understand, the language of sacrifice, of protection, of choosing life over death even when death would be easier." Anya squeezed his hand, and Alax felt something shift in his chest, not the pain of his healing wounds, but something deeper. Hope, perhaps. The fragile, terrifying possibility that this war might actually end. If it means no more children in war zones, Alax said, looking at the assembled Valorians, then yes, I'll help negotiate your peace. The soldiers didn't kneel again. Instead, they saluted as one, their fists striking their chests in perfect synchronization. And in that moment, Alax understood that he'd done something far more powerful than winning a battle. He'd reminded two warring species of their shared values, their common ground. Sometimes, he thought, the most human thing you could do was simply be human, to act on instinct and compassion, to protect the vulnerable, to choose mercy over vengeance. And sometimes, just sometimes, that was enough to change everything. Anya smiled up at him, and somewhere in the distance, the guns fell silent,